What if I told you that you don't actually have a communication problem in your relationship? That you don't need to learn how to communicate better to stop the misunderstandings or stop the bickering or arguing, or to finally start bringing up your feelings instead of sweeping them under the rug? I know this because I spent years thinking that communication was the issue. I learned all the right tools, I practiced active listening, I worked with my therapist on communication, but somehow nothing changed in my relationship. And then I realized the problem was never communication. It was so much deeper. It was something that most couples don't even realize is missing. It took me almost 40 freaking years to figure this out, but in less than 10 minutes, I'm gonna show you exactly what it is and what you can do about it. I'm Lindsay. This is Loving with Intention. Thanks for hanging out. So, my fiance and I, we've been together for almost 9 years, and I can't tell you how many times I said, we just need to work on our communication. We just need to communicate better. And after we broke up, because of all the fighting and the challenges in our relationship, we got back together, obviously, and I was super into figuring out how to make part two of our relationship so much better. So I dove into relationship growth, something fierce, and I was very, very focused on communication. So I learned all the tools. I read the books. I took the courses. I doubled down on working with my therapist. And like I said, I really tried to learn the right quote unquote language, the I feel statements, not using you statements, being concise, gathering my thoughts before I was sharing with my partner. I literally used to write out scripts with my therapist of what I would say next time that we would get into one of our usual argument spirals. You know, the kind of arguments where one of you gets triggered and says something snappy, and the next thing you know, you're caught in this back and forth of unkind words, and you both leave that feeling totally misunderstood, totally frustrated. But my perfect scripts didn't work for those situations. We still had a communication problem, and I couldn't figure out why. But then, after more than 30 years of living on planet Earth, I learned that in our relationships, it's not a communication problem. It's an emotional intimacy problem. Because when emotional intimacy is strong, even messy communication works. You give each other the benefit of the doubt. You're willing to hear each other out. You're willing to look for each other's best intentions. But when emotional intimacy is low or missing entirely, even the perfect words, my perfect scripts, they don't land. Every conversation feels like walking through a minefield. You don't know what's going to set off your partner. They don't know what's going to set you off. You don't know what's going to make them shut down or get defensive or reactive or snappy. You just don't know. So just for a moment, I want you to think back to when you first got together with your partner. Communication probably felt really easy. It totally did for me. You didn't have to try hard to feel seen or understood. You could talk for hours effortlessly. The honeymoon stage, we all know it. We are literally high on love drugs in this stage. Everything is new. You're emotionally open. You both want to know each other and connect. So when we fast forward to now in your relationship, it doesn't make sense that we would just forget how to communicate. We had no problem communicating back then. And again, that's because it's not a communication problem. It's not a communication issue. It's an emotional intimacy problem. So when the high of the honeymoon stage wears off, which is anywhere from 2 months to 2 years on average, my partner and I got a whopping 2 months out of it, and then we enter into the next stage of relationships, which is the power struggle stage, it makes sense that we haven't actually created emotional intimacy, and that's what's required to continue to communicate with ease. This is a place that we get to commit to learning how to do this whole relationship thing, because we never learn how to do it, and then we get to grow and thrive together. So if you were wondering, are we lacking emotional intimacy? There are many, many signs of this, and I want to share some of them because it is such a great time to just pause, check in with yourself, especially if you feel like communication is a problem. So personally in my relationship, we felt disconnected. I went from vulnerably sharing my heart, vulnerably, that was a challenging word, sharing my heart in the honeymoon phase, to being super hesitant or just altogether avoiding topics or sharing my deeper needs and fears and feelings in our relationship because it would often turn into an argument or I just feel invalidated. And a side note, always, you're just hearing my side of the story. So I will just own that when my partner would bring things up, I would get super defensive. I would totally invalidate his experience. I would try to tell him that what he was feeling didn't make sense. So we had frequent misunderstandings too. We could literally go from having such a fun day, we're laughing, and then we get into a misunderstanding. I find myself trying to explain myself in a million different ways, just trying to be heard. I wanted so bad for him to see my perspective. And looking back, again, I was not good at seeing his. And oh my gosh, how many times I said, no, that's not what I meant. But it would be too late. We'd be already caught up in that whirlwind of misunderstanding. We would often end up in a standoff of totally shutting down. No one's talking. No one wants to be the first person to break the ice. And another sign of lack of emotional intimacy for us, we stopped talking about our dreams and goals. I remember these super fun, amazing, life-giving conversations when we were in the honeymoon stage of talking about what we both dreamed of in the future, but those stopped happening. We weren't sharing those things anymore. So those are just a few standouts for us in my relationship. And other common signs of lack of emotional intimacy are decrease in physical intimacy and affection. So kisses and hugs, quick touches on the way by, and sex and intimacy, those greatly decrease too, if they even exist at all. And often there will be a total lack of conflict, but instead this feeling where you're just feeling like roommates because you're sweeping things under the rug, you're not bringing up hurts, which means that you're not feeling seen or understood. So it ends up feeling like you're just going through the motions. Every day is Groundhog Day. It doesn't feel good. And another sign, you might notice that you don't look forward to spending time with your partner, or you kind of dread them walking in the door at the end of the day. It sometimes feels easier when they aren't there with you. It feels easier to parent, or you feel like you can just relax and do your own thing. And maybe also there's a lack of trust. It could be past betrayals, or just a sense that you're not supported by your partner, that they're not there for you, and it really hurts. So if you resonate with any of those things, any of those signs, and there's so many more too, there's good news. And again, it took me a long damn time to realize this. So if you're like, oh man, I am 30 or 40 or 50 and I didn't know that it wasn't a communication problem, it's about emotional intimacy, I'm right there with you. And we get to learn and grow together. It is never too late. And the good news is that you can build emotional intimacy. And when you do, your communication starts to flow naturally again. Less tension, less snappiness, less arguments, and you actually feel safe to bring things up that bother you. You don't sweep them under the rug because you start to trust that this is going to go well. I'm going to be heard. So, of course, we're going to talk about how to increase emotional intimacy because this was part of what I learned along the journey. And there are so many ways to do this, so I'm going to share some of the big ones that I focused on in my relationship and what I learned. To increase emotional intimacy, we need to move from a place of blame into 100% personal responsibility for our side of the street. Not for our partner's stuff, but for our side. I spent so much time trying to change my partner, wishing he would change his unhealthy patterns so that we could just be happy. But things just got worse. My needs were so valid for ease, connection, happiness, feeling good, but the blame game, it just kept me stuck. So when I shifted that focus to looking at me and how I was showing up, then I started to build emotional intimacy. I started doing things to help our relationship thrive, like speaking his love language, being intentional with hellos and goodbyes, agreeing to disagree without trying to force him to agree with me, listening to him, learning his apology language and using it to apologize to him. I started working on my nervous system so that I could start to pause and breathe and stay more regulated in order to be present. And I will share too, if your partner's not on board with this, what I did, because that was the case for me. And appreciation, super big in my relationship. My partner was so used to hearing the things that upset me or that he was doing quote unquote wrong, or me saying, we need to talk about this. So he was rarely hearing anything positive. I started an appreciation book. It helped keep me accountable to myself on this new mission to show up in healthier ways. Every day I wrote, I appreciate the thing and how it made me feel. I asked him if he wanted to do it with me, but I made it totally pressure-free. If he did it, cool. If he didn't do it, also cool. So I wrote pages before he did his first entry, but I was okay with it because I was the one doing the research. I was the one moving into 100% personal responsibility. I was the one who got a relationship coach. And I didn't want to stop after a page just because he hadn't written in it yet. I was committed to making that change. And I knew it was easier for me to write these appreciations because words of affirmation is one of my love languages. It isn't his. So it was easy and effortless to write these things. So using this book also helped me start to see the good instead of focusing on all the bad. And there was good there all along. So it created this lighter energy and increased emotional intimacy. And if you've been here before, you've probably heard me talk about Wonder and Look Under, one of my favorite concepts on planet Earth. major emotional intimacy builder. So when I learned that under every relationship poison, like criticism, eye rolling, arguing, pointing out what your partner does wrong, shutting down, there's so many of them, under all of them are beautiful, valid needs. This was a huge key to creating emotional intimacy, like huge, huge. Gold star by this one. So when I started getting curious about what was going on under my behaviors, when I learned that my defensiveness was an unhealthy strategy to get needs met, it helped our relationship so much. So if my partner brought up something that bothered him and I got defensive and I was like, I didn't mean it like that. That's not what I meant at all. I was just saying that because, and I'm defending myself. And then I get into all the excuses and reasons for doing the thing that hurt him, which totally invalidated his feelings and experience. Well, under all of those defensives, beautiful unmet needs. I wanted to be seen for my best intentions. I wanted to be understood. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to feel safe, trusted, to feel secure, for ease, for harmony. Beautiful, valid needs, none of which he could possibly see when I'm completely invalidating him and his experience and justifying myself. But to get curious and wonder and look under meant I started to shift my reaction, and then we could have safe conversations about those needs. Game changer, hello, emotional intimacy. And that's just one example because we have so many relationship poisons. And when I could see that I had beautiful unmet needs under mine, it helped me see that, of course, there were beautiful, valid needs under the things that he was doing that I found hurtful. I got to, and continue to get really curious about what's under both of our things. When I started working on these things to increase our emotional intimacy, like I said, even though he wasn't on board with relationship growth, I got a coach alone, things started changing. And he actually ended up getting on board with me and doing the work with me too, all because I had that coach who helped me change the way that I showed up in our relationship. I changed, oh my gosh, so much. I share this because there's so much hope to create a thriving relationship, even if you're the only one watching this right now, even if you're the only one who is ready to dive into creating emotional intimacy because you've been stressed out because of your communication problem. So at the end of the day, you do not need to be a perfect communicator. You need to be a safe space for each other. Focusing on emotional intimacy means that communication starts to flow again and things feel so much easier. Without that safe space, if you don't feel seen, heard, safe, emotionally connected, trusting, it makes so much sense that communication just goes sideways or that it doesn't happen much at all. When our body and our mind start to feel safe, then we're able to communicate to each other and connect. And it is such a beautiful thing, such a beautiful thing. So we really get to keep nurturing our relationships forever. We get to continue to grow and evolve together. We get to choose to keep recommitting to our relationship growth journey. And that's what loving with intention, ding, 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 is all about. I am on this journey with you, and it really starts with one small step to start increasing that emotional intimacy. You can head to the description box to grab my free Superpowered Appreciation. Just a little consistency with this can actually start shifting the energy in your relationship right before your eyes. We don't need to start with all the things to create emotional intimacy. We just need to take the next step. You got this. Thank you so much for being here. I am sending so much love into your day. If you want to hang out more with me, please subscribe. I would love to have you here.